Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to welcome back our special guest today. GS Youngblood is the author of a book called The Masculine in Relationship, and he's coming out with a brand new, deeper look into embodiment. And that's what our conversation is all about today, is how can people benefit from an embodiment practice, and what does an embodiment practice look like? For me personally, embodiment has changed over the years. From 1997, when I got into weightlifting, that was my introduction to an embodiment practice. I began to understand what the connection between our mind and our body can do for us in building resilience, grit, purpose, and direction in our lives. What I've seen since has evolved into a deeper understanding of what awareness of my body can respond to versus react to, and my own resilience through cold showers, meditation, breath work, jujitsu, and continued pursuits in weightlifting. In today's episode, we field a couple of questions that we received from our community, both of which bring a lot of value to the conversation between the masculine and feminine energy dynamics and polarity that can exist in a relationship. GS and I do not hold back. We dig deep into modern relationships and we explore exactly where it is that men go wrong in relationships. That's where we kick off our interview today with our special guest, GS Youngblood. Welcome back to the program, GS Youngblood. How are you, sir?
Dave, thanks for having me back on. I really did enjoy our conversation last time. So I'm glad we get to do it again. And everything is really great. Since the last time we talked, the book just continues to sell. And it's getting to be a lot of word of mouth. I'm not having to put a lot of advertising dollars into it. Because it's word of mouth, which is actually pretty amazing because guys tend to do everything in isolation. So for men to actually recommend books to other men is somewhat rare. So the fact that it is happening, it just reminds me of why I wrote the book in the beginning. There's just a lot of guys in pain. There's a lot of guys who are they're confused. They want to be a good man for the woman that they're in relationship with, and things just keep going wrong and they're not connecting and she's not opening the way that she used to and she's irritable and guys just get to be their wits end and as we talked about last time, that's what I've tried to demystify for men, because I really do think there's a code in there that can be broken, so to speak, or cracked rather. And you can start to use these principles of masculine, feminine polarity, to improve your relationship, to open her up, to reduce the amount of fights and irritability, increase the amount of sex that we're having, which of course, most guys, we use that as our barometer for a lot of things.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. The book you're referencing is Masculine in Relationship, and it resonates with me as you say that word of mouth is what's spreading the purpose for why you wrote the book. And yeah, same thing on my side. When I began to read it, I got it recommended to me from a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And now I recommend it to both my men's groups that I'm involved in, as well as here on the podcast. So since that book came out, we had our conversation and then we're looking forward to reading more about embodiment in your next work.
Yeah, that's the book that I just released, April 16th. It went out on Amazon, and it's called The Art of Embodiment for Men. And one of the cornerstones of the blueprint is element one, respond versus react, as you and I have talked about a lot before. And the foundation of respond versus react is embodiment work. This is work that takes your attention out of the thinking mind and brings it down into the body. And when you have even a small part of your attention on the body, it has the natural effect of bringing you out of your mind and more into the present moment. And I'll just not jump into it right away, but that's the impetus for wanting to write this book, because it was one of the number one things. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Embodiment is the number one thing that a man can do to really build his masculine core. And I think as I talk to people, as I coach more people, and then as I just even deepened into my own practice, I started to realize that it needed more follow-up. The chapter in the book on embodiment wasn't enough. So I wanted to really dedicate a whole separate book to it, to all the things that I've learned over 20 years of when I started meditation, actually more than 20 years, back in 97 was really when I started meditating. I really wanted to share that at a deep level. And Dave, one of the challenges is that I really enjoyed the wide appeal and the great book sales for the masculine in relationship, but this is a narrower book. This is not a broad topic that's going to kind of bring the whole landscape into clarity for you. This is like, we're taking one piece of this and we're going deep. So the book is not for everyone. It's really for men that have made the commitment that say, I want things to be different in my relationship. I need things to be different in my relationship. I'm willing to put in the time and the effort to go deep on this thing that, GS, you're telling me is really going to help change my life. And that's who I want to buy this book. Men that really want to make a change in their relationship and also to become more grounded men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've said that a couple of times now so far, that the men really do want to show up in their partnership. Mm-hmm. And earlier you mentioned that they're not quite understanding where they go wrong. So let's answer that question first. Where do men go wrong in relationship?
It's very simple. Our woman gets upset, energy comes at us, and that induces anxiety in us. I mean, men, we want to, our egos want to feel like we're competent. We want to feel like we're loved. We want to feel like we're accepted. We want to feel like we're winning in relationships, so to speak. Yeah. That's just how we are. Let's celebrate that way we are. But the problem in which she's upset, we feel the opposite of those things. Anxiety arises, and then the next thing we do is usually some kind of non-masculine behavior that is going to make that anxiety stop. So, for instance, like if she's upset at me, to then begin to defend myself. She gives me emotion. I start to defend myself with information because I think, hey, she's got kind of some of her facts a little bit wrong. I'll just explain this to her and she'll stop being mad and the anxiety will go away. Yeah. It's going to be great. Here we go. And of course, we all know that it never works. Stonewalling, she's upset. We kind of go stoning. That's the same thing. We're making the anxiety stop by kind of numbing ourselves to it. So if I can't feel it, then there's no anxiety. We both know those are not successful relationship patterns. And not even relationship, and not even intimate relationship. If you do that shit at work too, it's not going to work. Now it has less impact than in your intimate relationship. So there had to be a better way. So the way that men fail themselves is anxiety arises and then we do something to try to make it stop. And that something is relationally dysfunctional. And that's if I had to generalize this at the most meta level, that's what men are doing. Now I can get into 100 examples of what specifically we're doing. I think I just gave one of them with the defensiveness, but that's the pattern over and over. So what's the remedy? I put that out there for myself. Right. To answer the question, embodiment. Because embodiment teaches you how to, number one, come out of your thinking mind. So that's one. And two, how to tolerate and be with that intensity instead of the compulsive, panicked need to make it stop. Because if I can just sit with this intensity within me, it's not going to control me as much. I don't have to get away from it at all costs, which is what most of us do when we get anxious. So that's why I think embodiment is the number one thing a man can do to build up his masculine core. Because you become more grounded, you become less reactive. And from that non-reactive place, you can then be in relationship more out of choice than compulsion to make something stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And I can replay moments in my life where I got reactive as opposed to responsive. Yeah. And what I've found after beginning an embodiment practice for myself is that outside of conflict in my relationship, when that anxiety shows up, I'm training my central nervous system for response over reaction in the future. Yeah. I'm preparing myself to better handle that anxiety that shows up in my body at work or in my partnership or on the road. Road rage is something that's real. And I find that an embodiment practice prepares me for those moments better.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. And maybe I could just comment why I think that dynamic takes place. Because we're all in our thinking mind, all day. Guess what? All day long, what do? We stare at our phones, we stare at our laptops, we read messages, we read social posts, we read articles, we watch videos, we're just inundated with information. So of course we're all in our analytical mind when it comes to relating. And so we're getting, very logical and analytical. And so Stimuli come from the world, like they surprise us with when people are upset or having other strong emotions. And then our mind kicks in with our defenses, with our interpretations and projections. Like, your woman, you walk in the door and your woman's all upset at you. And your mind's like, oh, she's just being kind of a cranky bitch. Like, that's your explanation to yourself. And then you believe it. And then you start treating her as if that's what's true, when there's probably something else more that's deeper going on with her. But you believe the story and the projection of your mind, because your mind is trying to protect you in all kinds of ways. So what if you could get out of that? What if you could actually just be in the moment, and she's having her experience, but you can actually be in proximity to it, and you do that by coming out of the mind, the thinking mind, and all of its stories and projections, and having some of your attention down on the body. The reason that works is because these stories, they're thoughts, obviously, and thoughts are always about past and future. Because if it's about now, you're just experiencing it. Otherwise, it's a thought and a story and a memory about past and future, or projection. When you're with sensation only exists in this moment, from moment to moment. Yeah, I see you nodding, so you get this.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have some attention, you don't have to have all of your attention. Like, it's not like you're, kind of like focused on your body solely, but you just have some attention. And I'll describe, we'll go into more what that means, but just need a little bit. It anchors you to the present moment. It's like a trail of breadcrumbs out of the stories back into the present moment. So you anchor to the body, you anchor into the present moment more. And but you probably feel this. Don't you do martial arts? Did you tell me that?
Yeah, I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And that presence on the mat is incredibly important for my safety and also my success in the sport too. So what comes up for me when you're sharing that presence in the moment, and you said earlier, can you sit with it when it comes up with you? And I also tune into when I'm grounded. I took a hike with the dog earlier today. It's Memorial Day, and the trail was really busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping to get out into a little bit of nature and solitude. And I found myself in my head. And when I'm in my head and in my thoughts, in my thinking brain, I couldn't hear the crickets. I couldn't hear the locusts. I couldn't hear the birds. And every time that I became present to the animal sounds, not just the wind, not just my feet touching the ground, I got present to the sounds of nature. That's when I knew I was in the present moment and feeling grounded and embodied.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. It's like, what are the stimuli in the moment, in the present moment? And you named a couple, the wind, feeling the sensation of wind on your face, the birds, the audit, it's an auditory sensation, right? And just tuning into that in the moment. And then with embodiment, you're doing all kinds of physical sensations that I talk about a lot. So you hit it on the head. It's really using what's happening in the now to become more present in the moment. And then, I don't know, maybe you were on that hike by yourself and the dog, but like if you then went into a relational situation, you're going to be way more functional, way more connected and present. It's going to feel a lot better to your feminine partner when you're in that state. It's palpable for them, palpable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also find that time alone, that time in solitude away from my partner, if I were in a partnership, is very important so that I can return to the relationship grounded, embodied, a healthier version of myself. And it doesn't have to be a hike. It doesn't have to be jujitsu. What else would be helpful on this topic before we move on?
Well, I think let's just talk about a daily practice, because I've kind of been skirting around embodiment and talking about it rather than actually going into it. So maybe we should, go into it. It's like, okay, cool. You sold me on embodiment, but what does that mean? what did I just sign up for? So really it comes down to a daily practice. And, embodiment is this combination of, breath is part of it. Meditation is part of it. Movement is part of it. Creating intensity experiences is part of it. And, different embodiment exercises include different things. One of the things two of the principles that are a bedrock of how I teach are attention and intention. And people know what those mean. And meditation practices, sometimes we'll talk about these things, but I find they only talk about them tangentially. But for me, it's an every moment kind of thing. So you don't need a lot of fancy, the coolest Kundalini practice that they discovered in ancient Tibet. It's like, you don't actually need anything fancy. You need to have consciousness around where you put your attention and the quality of that attention. And then you have to have consciousness around bringing intention to any breath or movement that you're doing. So, the simplest embodiment exercise in the world is for you and I to sit here, and we'll breathe in, in through the mouth, out through the mouth. So it's the simplest, like, duh, okay, great, you breathed in and out. But think about bringing your attention. So even though kind of my attention is a little bit on my talking and seeing you visually, see if I can bring my attention down to my belly and the way that my actual soft tissues stretch with the inhale. So why don't I coach you through it? So just go ahead and take your slow in-breath. Yeah, take your slow in-breath. But I want you to drop your attention to the belly and just feel your skin stretch. And then as you exhale now, you can feel the skin start to relax and contract. So you're directing your awareness down to a specific body part. That's part one. And part two is that attention is not thinking attention. So there's a way that you could sort of picture picture the belly. You could think about the skin stretching, but it's sort of an arm's length experience. But instead, you just actually just feel it. Feel the visceral sensation of the stretch. Mm-hmm. So that's your attention. It's where you put your attention, and it's the quality of the attention rather. And that's a moment by moment practice. It's not like, okay, I'm going to put my attention down there and then I'm going to drift and go on autopilot. It's you actually moment by moment, you're feeling it. When you have your feeling attention down lower in the body, just, try it. You'll see the thoughts just naturally go out of your mind. And this is where I find embodiment to be way more compelling than meditation, because in meditation, you're using the mind to notice thoughts and then let go of those thoughts. So it's the mind governing the mind. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, that's a little incestuous. It's like the fox guarding the henhouse. Whereas with embodiment, when you turn your attention towards sensation, not only is it kind of harder to, easier to stay with it, but it just naturally works to crowd out the thoughts. You don't have to let them go. They just kind of go away on their own, because you're paying attention to something else. And that, in this case, is sensation. So that's about the attention. And then the other part is the intention. Breathe, Dave, do that breath I just showed you, begin. Okay, you'll decide, and now you'll just start breathing, and then you're thinking about baseball. You're thinking about what you're going to say next. Like, you actually haven't brought your intention to the breath. So what I'd say is, let's do the breath together. Actually, I won't do it. I'll talk. So go ahead with the in-breath. But I want you to really consciously choose when you start that in-breath. I want you to choose the next moment that you continue the in-breath. Now keep choosing the next moment. Now it's choose to slow and stop. Now make the conscious choice to turn around and start the exhale very slowly. Choose to continue the exhale, choose to continue the exhale, etc., until you have fully. So what you're doing is you're now bringing intention to breath and movement. It's a wonderful muscle to stretch and to strengthen, because we want to live with more intention. We want to speak with intention. We want to move with intention. We want to react with intention. Everything we want to start to slow down and bring a choicefulness to it. And practicing intention in the smallest of things, which is like breathing, actually maps over to your real life. So what you'll find is that because you're practicing intention, you'll start to slow down in life and start to choose and operate out of choice rather than just sort of habitual reaction in your life, which is what we all do. Mm-hmm. So bringing this quality of intention is way more important than like the newest, coolest Kundalini breath that I might show you, right? You can bring these qualities that strengthen very important muscles, even in the simplest of breaths that I showed you. It really doesn't get any simpler than that.
Yeah, I feel that when I practice breath work, And meditation and that intentional breath work can be separate.
Mhm.
And I almost find that when I'm doing breath work, it's easier for me to meditate, quote unquote, meditate, like
Mhm.
because the thoughts go away when I'm tuning into my body
Yeah.
and connecting my consciousness to my body awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. I just say everybody out there, never do pure meditation again, people. Like never. Because I think there's this, I mean, I say that tongue in cheek a little bit, but I think there's a much more effective path to not only an effective practice in the moment, but also sticking with it, which is really the biggest
Mhm.
problem, I think, for most guys. They're like, yeah, I tried meditation, I got bored and drifted off,
Right.
and really it just fell off my radar. I mean, that's a
Right.
common story. That was me for a number of years starting in 97. It was just hard to
Right.
stick with it. But I find embodiment so much more compelling to stick with it. And I find it gets a lot better results for really grounding my own nervous system and my thinking mind.
Yeah, I can see that as somebody who likes to notice. I notice my embodiment way more often than I would notice meditation and its
Hmm.
benefits.
Yeah.
I also think I understand what you mean when you bring intention to something. When the man brings intention to breath work or to an embodiment practice,
Hmm.
it's a little different than bringing intention to meditation. Like meditation, like you said earlier, keeps me in my head. Notice my thoughts, move away, move back
Hmm.
to where am I returning to? I'm returning back to my body anyways
Hmm. Yeah.
in that moment.
Yeah, it's so true. So I this is why I really am encouraging guys, because I think meditation is a much more broadly understood and practiced tradition, but I think it's also way more uh, it's quit way more often than anything else, because it's hard to have that, practice that sticks. Okay, I wanted to see if there was anything else I wanted to say about the practice of embodiment.
Sure.
That I mean, we talked the simplest of things more to illustrate the framework. I call that the ANI framework. So it's the
Hmm.
ANI is attention and intention. So
Yeah.
very, very obvious. And that's the
Yeah.
framework in which I teach. And then I take guys into a lot of exercises that really I'll tell you what we do. We use breath as a source of sensation. We use gravity, and we use intensity. And gravity is one of my favorite. Like, you can always use gravity. I mean, just think about it. Just drop your attention to your butt and you feel the weight in the chair. Then you can do all kinds of embodiment around feeling that weight. And that's actually one of my favorite techniques it's one of my favorite practices, is to really feel that sensation of weight. But then
Hmm.
to bring that into real life, where, my woman might be fired up about something and she's got a lot of energy pointed at me, I just drop my attention down to my feet if I'm standing
Hmm.
there, and I feel the sensation of weight, even while I am with her. So audibly and visually, I'm with her, but the other half of my attention is down, feeling my sense of weight. It instantly anchors my nervous system and grounds it, and I'm much more present and able to handle the feminine intensity that's coming my way. Um, so not only is that an in the moment practice, but pretty much every session I'm having guys sit with the sensation of weight and then be with the outside world. It's a technique I called split attention,
Hmm.
and it's one of the bedrocks that I do in almost every embodiment session that I lead.
Right. Yeah. Before we move on, I think you touched on a key point that we could expand upon, and that's when men quit or when men have a hard time with discipline around an embodiment practice.
Hmm.
So let's talk briefly about why it's challenging to stick to it, and
Hmm.
then a few ways that men could um, improve their discipline around this practice.
Yeah. Well, this is an age-old problem. Why don't we stick with things? And it's a lot of FOMO. I mean, I use that phrase in a certain way, but it's actually a total section in the book about FOMO. It's like, oh my gosh, there's this other thing that I need to be doing more than this, and we fool ourselves that we can't actually carve out the time. I don't think it's anything different than going to the gym and being lazy about that. But I do think there's a certain flavor where a lot of guys are willing to do the mental thing. Like, they'll buy my book and read it.
Hmm.
But to do the thing that's not just the mental exercise, but to actually have to throw yourself into something, and actually you're going to feel more, you're going to experience more. That's not our forte. I think there's an extra layer of resistance around something
Agreed.
like this,
Yeah.
more than just going to the gym, because to going to the gym, you just grunt some, reps out and you don't have to feel anything, but in this, the way I teach you, you're going to feel a lot more. So I think there's some natural resistance in that. To me, it's like anything, you need an accountability group. Guys, I say, look, just do a 7-day challenge, excuse me, a 7-day challenge. Just say for the next 7 days, I'm going to put 10 minutes on the timer, which isn't very much time. And I'm going to do it for the next 7 days. And just what will happen is with embodiment, you'll start to see good results. Even in a week, you can start to kind of feel your nervous system come down a little bit, maybe not irreversibly, but it's started. And just do it for 7 days with a timer for 10 minutes, and then use that as motivation to do the next 7 days. I think those are some of my suggestions.
Right. Yeah. It sounds as if a man could get a lot of improvement in self-trust around that 7-day commitment, when he sticks to something that he's really wanting to experience. And you mentioned going to the gym and throwing some weights around. That, to me, it's where I started. That was the gym was an introduction to personal growth and embodiment for me.
Yeah.
And then when I began to connect the dots with well, it's easy to feel the stress of the weights. I'm open to that challenge. I'm leaning into that challenge. And I feel the results, that soreness. And then I see the adaptation. That's what a man is saying to himself. I look good. I feel good.
I feel strong.
Right. And that's a great way to begin an embodiment practice, connecting our consciousness to what we feel in our body. And then we can start to peel back layers of what else am I able to feel? And I believe that a great point you made was connect with a group, because we can go to our men's group. One of my 2 men's groups are options to, hey guys, this is what I'm feeling. Well, have you been there before? What do you feel when I say that out loud? And oftentimes I don't even need the reflection. I'm just hearing myself narrate what I feel out loud. And I'm like, oh, wow, that brings some more awareness around what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Not just in my body, but in my emotions as well.
Yeah. I love that you sort of connected this, feeling your emotions versus feeling physical intensity, because that's, it's hard for guys to feel. We're all like that. We're just denser, and we don't need to be ashamed about it or anything. This feeling down into the body, even that act of feeling your belly skin stretch a little bit, maps over in your ability to actually feel what the hell is going on inside of you emotionally. And that's one of the ways I love this, because now that I'm, have been deep in the practice for a while, my feeling body has grown immensely. I can feel into my woman's pain. And that's the number one thing she's wanting. She's wanting to be felt. So we're not doing this for them. We're doing this so we can have a fulfilling relationship that's not about a bunch of criticism and fighting and lack of sexuality. We want it about closeness and fun and sexuality and connection and successful relating. And one of the ways to do that is to be a more feeling creature of her emotional state. Because if she feels you feeling her, that's very satisfying to the feminine nervous system. And it's really going to open up a lot of things. So, there's a reason we're doing this. And it's not only to be in the present moment. It's not only to be in our thinking mind, but it's also to increase our capacity to feel what in the hell is going on inside of us and what is going on inside of her. And that is masculine. That's one huge part of masculinity that I think is maybe not as counterintuitive for a lot of guys. Are I thought masculinity was about clarity and direction and boom and confidence. Right. And yeah, that's part of it. That's stage 1, or phase 1 of building that's sort of within you, build that. But then if you want to be in a relationship, you got to go into the relational piece. So a lot of what I'm talking about is what I refer to as the relational masculine. So it's first about getting your own upright masculine power and energy developed. And then it's taking that and then learning to relate with that. And so again, it's that relational masculine capacity that I teach and is part and parcel of this embodiment work.
Yeah, let's dig into that just a little bit. What I heard you describing is when the feminine feels that you feel her, and without getting shaken and without getting ungrounded or dysregulated. I really, really appreciate that word over anything else. Like when somebody uses the word triggered, I more accurately describe that as being dysregulated. So the masculine energy can hold that grounded presence, which is what I hear you describing, by not becoming dysregulated by all the emotions that his partner is feeling in the moment, not taking on those feelings for himself, not taking that personally, and also being present while staying grounded. Am I saying that clearly?
Yeah, I mean, I would describe it in slightly different ways, but we're really saying the same thing. It's like when she comes at you in energy, you can just get blown out, and we'll call it dysregulation. And then the next thing you do is some stupid thing to make your anxiety stop, some non-relational, non-connection creating thing that you don't want to do. So you put that aside, and yeah, it's a tricky art. Like, how do I be with, and then not take it on? Because a lot of guys will feel blamed because probably she's putting some blame in there. And so we don't want to be wrong. So then we get defensive. But instead, how can we be with it, be present, feel it, feel what it's like to be her, but without taking that on and then going into stories about how we're getting blamed and we got to defend ourselves. Like that's the art of this. It's so tricky, you know, as you
or fixing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or fixing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything to like make it stop.
Which I think is the underlying goal of that masculine dysregulation in the moment, is like, how do I make this feeling stop? It's so intense for me.
Yeah.
I need to either escape, numb, or just push it away, or over the top, overcome it. I think it's almost like taking up the space in a dysregulated way is another strategy that's not relational.
Yeah, it's so true. It's really true. And you know what you said about, it's like being with this intensity, learning to just be with, is a huge part of what we're trying to do here. I think you'll recall I said earlier, I focus people on 3 different types of sensations. There's gravity, there's breath, and there's intensity. And I didn't explain what intensity was, but intensity are exercises you do that deliberately create an intensity within you. Holding the breath, holding your arms up in a posture. We do a lot of cold immersion. These are all forms of intensity. And so what I do is I really bring clients into those in pretty much every session, at least one of those. And then, there's a relational context that I give to it about being with the intensity, but also visualizing being with the other is what I call it. And so a lot of what I do is not just create an intensity in a vacuum and see how much you can tolerate, but it's, can you actually stay relational in the midst of that intensity? Like, that's tough. That's really tough. But when you train your body mind to handle physical intensity, it totally maps over into a capacity for relational and emotional intensity. So by training our bodies and then adding the relational context in practice, it allows us in the real life of relating to actually tolerate a lot more. And so, for me, like, the cold showers have been a huge stepping stone for me in terms of a higher level of capacity over the years. And that's just one example. But I love the intensity stuff. Guys like it too, because it's kind of, but it's bigger than that. It's more than just showing how much pain you can handle, but it's about growing your relational capacity.
Yeah, that resonates. A challenge that I face in that intensity is when I hold the breath. I feel a lot of intensity, a lot of fear shows up for me there. It's almost enacting that fight or flight in me, that sympathetic nervous system that's like shock, intense feelings of like, wow, I'm willingly, consciously, purposefully, intentionally holding my breath. Why am I freaking out?
Yeah. I was going to say, there's a panic to holding your breath. As you said, the fear that comes in. Yeah. Yeah. And when we do Wim Hof breathing, we do a lot of that breath holding, which I'm sure you've been exposed to. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds as if I could lean into that a little bit more in my own practice, whether that be during the cold shower, because I find myself like cringing or holding against that temperature. And I've become resilient to that and adapted to the cold showers. And yet I still have that intense feeling during breath work.
Yep. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, I on my website, I sell a short lesson. It's just a mini course on cold immersion and kind of give a protocol for how to go into the cold immersion. It's more than just like cranking it down to cold and toughing it out as long as you can. There's a whole relational context that you can use to train self better. And I love the cold work so much. That's why I put that out.
I hope you guys are enjoying this episode so far. I wanted to take a quick break from our conversation to invite you to take advantage of an opportunity to work with me now. I've just had a couple of spots open up for one-on-one coaching where you and I will sit together to unravel what it is that's coming up for you in your life, relationships, career, and wellness journey. That could include anywhere from an embodiment practice all the way up to gaining a deeper self-awareness through the Enneagram and attachment theory. If that's something that you're interested in exploring, don't hesitate to message me on Instagram at DaveGlazer_CSCS, or head on over to my website, daveglazer.com, to engage with me today. Now let's get back to the conversation with GS Youngblood. Yeah. So I put it out there to my audience, to my network. I asked for some questions. I mentioned that I was going to be interviewing you today, and I received a couple of questions. Then the one I want to start with actually relates to the feminine energy coming at the masculine in that moment of relating, whether that be in conflict or it just in the energy that shows up. And the question is, how can women better support the men trying to build their healthy masculine?
Well, I can tell you what not to do. It's don't tell the man to go do anything about building more It's like if you say go be more masculine, go learn to how to be more masculine, you can pretty much assure it's that he'll resist that. So,
Yeah.
but you can show for a man that has chosen to take it on and where you do see even small changes, it can help to really reinforce those with appreciation of like, hey, I'm noticing, you just seem a little bit more grounded and I love it, and talk about your, to the women, I say, talk about your pleasure at feeling even 5% more, foster the shoots that are coming up out of the ground with that. The other piece that I would add to this is not quite what was asked, but I'm going to say it anyway. Women, if you want to be more successful relative to your man's reactions, the number one thing you can do is the purest expression of your heart. And so there is always, well, I wouldn't say always, there is often, women showing their upset and they think they're just showing their emotions, but they're smuggling in blame. And that's where it goes wrong, because you've now given him something to defend against by smuggling in a little bit of blame. And yeah, it may have been this thing he did that triggered off your reaction, but the minute you start to blame is the minute it's gonna really shut down his empathy. Blame kills empathy. So give him the purest expression of your heart, which means, if it's something he did, it's like, what did I observe when you said X? I really felt myself get super scared, and so you're really talking about your own experience. And I think people get this. You talk about your own experience, but the minute you smuggle in any blame, any kind of toxicity, you're giving him something to defend. So give him nothing to defend against. Open your heart and share from the heart. And you're going to find him having to defend himself less. That doesn't mean it's your fault that he's defending himself. It just means if you want to bring your own success into your own hands, give the purest expression of your heart, not the blame, not the toxicity, not the after effects of something that might have happened to you 20 years ago. Purest expression of this heart, this moment, and you're longing to be closer to him in certain ways. And I think that's the number one thing that women can do. So I gave you sort of two answers there,
Yeah, the second half there, thank you very much for sharing that. I hear a lot of personal responsibility in there of how can each person take personal responsibility for how they communicate with one another.
Yeah. It's so true. And we always want to blame the other person because it feels good. If you're wrong, I'm right. I can be more relaxed, So can you resist that temptation and stay in your heart and stay in the moment? Stay within yourself of expressing what's going on for you. Yeah, it's so important. It's self-responsibility. I like that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And the second question is very common. I hear this a lot. I work primarily with women in my network and my
Mhm.
coaching business, and they're all very strong, independent, empowered women.
Yeah.
And so I'm not surprised that this question came to me. And I know it's not hypothetical.
Yeah.
Do you see a shift in masculinity with women becoming more independent?
Do I see a shift in masculinity? What do we mean by that? Do you know it?
I feel as if we could definitely explore what is lying underneath this question. And a little bit of historical background. World War II, there were a lot of men who went off to war, and women were forced to be head of household and wear a lot of different hats. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
we can almost picture that being like a starting point, or like the industrial shift, men off to work all day long.
Yeah.
And then we get the next generation down where men weren't shown how to be masculine because the man in their household was always out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're coming up on this divorce rate that it's extremely high,
Yeah.
50% or so. And that puts the woman in another place of head of household,
Yeah.
independent, almost in a place where they're forced to have to step up into that role.
Yep.
And I think in response to that, there is a shift in masculine energy when in response relationally with that independent woman.
I think David Data really clarified a lot of these things for us. And you've probably seen this. First of all, I have a couple answers here. But first, we're talking about energies. And these energies can be fluid. And I talk a lot about guys and their masculine and women and their feminine, but that's just for sort of ease of 80% of what most people are kind of signed up for. But it's just energy. So note that a woman can just as easily go into her masculine energy and can bring it. I mean, I've known some women just were like, kabam, as well as any man that I knew. So just energies that aren't owned by any particular gender.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the challenge, right? Because a woman will often, many women, I'll say, I don't want to generalize too much, many women go to a job and they're in their masculine. The workplace is primarily an arena for masculine energy. It's getting shit done. It doesn't mean that the feminine energy doesn't come in, but it's usually not the primary energy required of you. So you're a woman, you go all day long, and then you come home and you're still in that, and it's like, shit. How the guy's like, oh my God, she's so powerful, and I can't get her out of that, and I feel like we're butting heads here, and that's the problem with the modern world. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where, but it's the more that we talk about this masculine and feminine, I think it controls us less in terms of roles we have to play, and so we can learn to be more fluid. So for men, if you've got a woman that's in her masculine energy all day long, and the two of you buy into this, learn the skills to transition her out of her masculine energy into her feminine energy. I'm just going to speculate here, but 9 out of 10 times, if you do it well, she's going to like it. She's going to want that. And the 10th, who knows why that is? It's just various reasons. So men, you have to learn to transition her out. That is firmly within your capability. And you want to know how? Live the blueprint.
Yeah.
Okay. Live the blueprint. And I think I'm sort of mapping over to my second answer, which is when I came up with the masculine blueprint, I was saying, we live in a modern world where a lot of things have changed. What is masculinity? What's a form of masculinity that doesn't mean I have to subjugate the females, but I can be in my own power, and it allows her to be in her own form of power. And that's where the masculine blueprint came in. So maybe we'll just remind your listeners. So element 1 is respond versus react. This is a lot about grounding your nervous system, cultivating the quality of stillness and choicefulness. And embodiment is a huge part of that. So that's element 1. Element 2 is provide structure. So this is the man that he has clarity for what he wants, needs, what his boundaries are, what he thinks is right for himself as well as the couple. He's attuned to her needs, so he's folding those in implicitly or explicitly. And then he's creating structure and direction within the relationship. Doesn't mean he's the only one. It just means he's bringing more structure and direction. And she might be doing it in other ways, and you meld the two. But that's element 2, which is provide structure. Element 3 is create safety, so physical, financial, and emotional. And I think most people get physical and financial. Emotional safety is so important to a woman or really a feminine being relaxing back into her receptive, responsive energy. And so,
Right.
that's a definition of masculinity that I don't think steps on anybody's sovereignty or anybody's rights or anything like that, but it is powerful. And that's how any guy, any average Joe can look at that template and say, I can live more of that. I can cultivate a little bit more in each of those three. And so I say, yeah, the question asker was like, how has masculinity changed? And I think my offering of the blueprint is sort of my definition of what masculine energy looks like in the modern world,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's inhabited by a man or a woman. Although primarily I'm talking about men, but I had a few lesbian women reach out to me, and they're like, "Does this still apply?" And my answer was resoundingly yes, absolutely. If you're in a polarized relationship, it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. So I hope I've answered the question. I'm open to any follow-ups, but that's what I would offer.
Right. Yeah. What I heard you describe in describing masculinity in the modern world is that the shift has occurred away from that. And what I heard you describe in the pillar 2 provides structure. There's a ritual that I like to talk about of both partners coming home from work, and maybe the feminine partner goes and changes clothes before they do anything else. Or maybe the masculine partner has music playing if they arrive home first, or as soon as they arrive home, throw on music and dance just for a minute or two, or be close and hug for just a moment or two before you do anything else. And this is a structured ritual in a household that's agreed upon that they both enjoy.
Yeah.
And it helps them ground. It helps the masculine ground because he's providing safety, providing structure, being very responsive and non-reactive. And then they can get into the flow of the evening.
Yeah. Yep.
I like your example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the perfect example of a man offering some structure. It's like, hey, babe, we come home, we're kind of both in our work energies. Like, let's do this thing together. Are you up for that? And so yeah. I think that's a great example. I love that.
Well, GS, thanks for coming back. Thanks for spending the time with me. And before I let you go, how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about embodiment and the masculine in relationship?
Yeah, I think that the easiest way to access my work is, well, certainly go to my website, which is gsyoungblood.com. Get on the waiting list. You'll start to hear about new things that I'm offering. You can go to my Instagram site, GS Youngblood MIR, masculine in relationship. And then there's a Facebook page as well, which pretty much mirrors the content. But go to the website. You can see the books. I think the books are the easiest way to access my work. You can do coaching. I do one-on-one and group coaching, but also the online courses. I really recommend people try out they get the book, but also get the online course, because it's going to be very powerful training for you and help you build your own daily practice. I have an upcoming offering around probably a workshop that is around dark sexual energy, and men really, we've gotten so nice guy like. How do you bring more dark energy? And I don't know about your listeners, but the vast majority of the women that I talk to in relationship are wanting a little bit more of that darkness out of their man, particularly in the bedroom. And even the big grin on your face tells me you've heard this from other men or other sources. But it's one of the things I'm most excited about bringing to the world is this workshop around dark sexual energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I grin because my most popular piece of content I've ever put out there is about that dark masculine energy, that edgy side that we can bring to a relationship of like, I'm gonna tell you what to do right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you play with power dynamics in a world that is scarred by misogyny and domineering? It's a tricky dance, but I feel like I've got, I won't say the answer, but I've got a lot to offer in helping men cultivate this, even in that kind of confusing environment.
Yeah, sounds like we have a follow-up conversation already lined up.
Yeah, exactly. Our third one. Yeah.
Thanks again, GS.
Hey, maybe we'll get you to come to the workshop.
I would be happy to come by and chat with you about that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Very good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and got as much value out of it, as I know it brought a lot of value to my life right now. This is the second time I've had the opportunity to speak to GS one-on-one and bring him onto the podcast to answer questions that our community has on a frequent basis. If you found value in today's conversation, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and written review on your favorite podcast platform. That goes a really long way to helping us get the message of the podcast out to more people, where we cover modern dating, health and wellness, inspiration, motivation, and overall well-being in your lives. Also, if you know somebody who would get value out of the conversation today, please share this episode with just one person so that we can have our own impact in improving modern dating, where text messages, social media, and dating apps seems to be the way that people connect and communicate as they get back out there into the dating scene. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Connect with me on TikTok at Dave Glazer or on Instagram at DaveGlazer_CSCS. Likewise, please connect with GS Youngblood through his website, gsyoungblood.com, or on Instagram at GS Youngblood MIR. He's always available to answer my questions, and I know he'll be there for you too. So please don't hesitate to connect with him deeper and share this episode with one person. Until next week, this is Dave Glazer in Denver, Colorado, wishing you health and happiness wherever you're at in the world.